Final Fantasy II. This one never came to America or Europe till the PlayStation 1 port. I may have been a little bit harsh on this one when I did my original Final Fantasy tier list years ago. To be honest, this is the one that slipped my mind. I've forgotten about this one the most out of all the Final Fantasy games. Sorry.
Don't take it personal.
Because of that, I've been looking forward to replaying Final Fantasy II, and it takes quite a different direction to the original Final Fantasy I spoke about last time. Your 4 party members already have names, and that's because Square really tried to level up the storytelling and character writing this time around. No fancy job system or leveling up. Instead, we get a weapon and magic skill system as well as earning stat boosts after defeating so many enemies. It's a pity because something about leveling up always felt great. And gotta admit, I do miss the job system they abandoned from Final Fantasy 1, but that will make a comeback in Final Fantasy 3. So a little introduction to the world of Final Fantasy 2, this one begins with 4 heroes: Firion, Gus, Maria, and Leon, provided you don't give them custom names like Chungus, Karen, Shrek, and Jeff. Basically, an evil Parmesian emperor is conquering the world. He captures the kingdom of Finn, and in a pretty shocking start to the game, our party is run down by the Emperor's Black Knights. Now, this is the number one thing I did remember with Final Fantasy II, that jarring start with being slaughtered by Black Knights. Firion, Gus, and Maria awaken in the Wild Rose Rebel base, while Leon is completely lost, and we get this epic adventure battling this Emperor's oppression and searching for our lost Leon. From the start, you get a sense of just how powerful the Emperor's forces are, and you'll spend the majority of the game trying to avoid them. There's a lot of back and forth across the world as you accomplish things and report back to the Wild Rose Rebel base. Now, I thought it was easy to get lost and lose your sense of direction in Final Fantasy 1, but it's even more the case with Final Fantasy 2. And this is where the keyword system comes in. The keyword system is an entirely unique mechanic to Final Fantasy 2, and it never returned in any other main Final Fantasy game. So this system allows you to learn keywords from talking to characters. You can then ask characters about these keywords you've learned, and this is critical to progressing the story. On paper, this keyword system sounds great, a way to immerse the player with interactive storytelling. But it's kind of double-edged. When you miss out on learning a keyword, then you're unable to progress the story because you're missing that keyword. I guess it's the reason why this keyword system never returned in future Final Fantasies. So, with Leon lost, our 4th party slot is taken by different guests throughout the story. There's a few: a pirate girl, a white mage, and my favourite is Ricard the Dragoon. While the Emperor recruits a new Dark Knight general, coincidentally at the same time our Leon goes missing. Final Fantasy II is actually the origin of Dragoons and Dark Knights, in my opinion the 2 most awesome jobs in all of Final Fantasy. And Final Fantasy II is a lot of series firsts. This is the first time you get to ride a chocobo, fight behemoths and other monsters. Moogles even make an appearance. Well, prototype Moogles that appear more like beavers. Something cool I picked up on? You need a special pendant to speak to dragons. But without the pendant, I noticed that the dragons speak like they do in Final Fantasy XIV. I'm guessing 14 drew reference from this. Quickie, really want to level up my subscriber count because that's going to unlock early review copies of games. Cover lots of RPGs, and I'm planning to replay every mainline Final Fantasy game and working my way up each game every month. Thank you! I really do miss that traditional leveling up system. Instead, there's a chance to gain stat increases after combat, but what gets increased will be based entirely on what you did or what abilities you used. I feel like combat got a little bit more advanced with 2. Even just the first boss was heavily resistant to physical attacks, and you'd have to make use of magic. You'll also increase your skill levels with magic or specific weapon types as you use them. I can completely see what they were going for. While there is no job system, you can somewhat build your characters to almost have a job. Have someone focus on healing and they'll be built like a white mage. Or have someone focus on wielding daggers and you've almost got a thief. but having built up skill with a specific weapon type over time then discourages you from trying other similar weapon types. Like my Gus, I swapped between spears and axes throughout the game, and because of that, he fell behind quite a bit. I've got to admit, I do miss that job system from Final Fantasy 1, even if it was just in its basic form. And like I said, really miss the traditional leveling up system, but at least we still get the victory fanfare after every battle. And that's become iconic over time. Dun, 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 dun. This weapon skill system never really makes a return in the future mainline Final Fantasy games. Well, until we get this system's evolution in Final Fantasy XI, it's a much better system there where you'll learn weapon skill abilities and eventually ultimate relic abilities from higher skill levels. But it was still a huge ball ache catching up with different weapon types you might not use as often. So the story involves lots of going back and forth across the world. We're often tasked with delving into dungeons to retrieve something or saving someone. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the designs or layouts behind these dungeons, and there's loads of these doors that just lead to these identical square rooms which are almost always empty. But I will admit, the final dungeon, Castle Pandemonium, that's a pretty awesome and complex dungeon, filled with useful treasures, optional bosses, and my favourite piece of music. Something else I really like is that for a large part of the game, you're no match for the Emperor's forces, and you'll have to work your way around them. You're even slaughtered at the very beginning of the game by them. You get that sense of repression, but eventually, as you become stronger, you'll be able to take them on and you can look back and feel how far you've progressed. So we rebel against the Emperor's forces, there's lots of death and sacrifices made. We end up retrieving a legendary Tome of Ultima to turn the tide. It's a little bit of an underwhelming spell, but I'll take it. After we finally defeat the Emperor, Square went for a big plot twist. Remember our fourth party member Leon, who we lost at the very beginning of the game? Turns out he's the Emperor's Dark Knight, and he's taken the throne for himself. And as we go to stop him, the real Emperor returns from hell, and our Dragoon Ricard, he has to make one last sacrifice to save us. In typical Final Fantasy fashion, we get an extravagant endgame dungeon, Castle Pandemonium. It's pretty awesome, as I talked about earlier, and we get to finish off that Emperor. Leon goes his own separate way, while we say our goodbyes to the spirits of everyone who sacrificed themselves in the war, including Ricard. I really like this little emotional moment. Bear in mind, this was on the NES, well, the Japanese equivalent. They've got you emotionally invested in these tiny 2D pixel sprites. This level of storytelling was pretty groundbreaking in video games. Overall, I do like Final Fantasy 2, the first real attempt at telling a huge story and developing characters. The introduction of Dark Knights, Dragoons, and classic Final Fantasy monsters. But I think the skill system brings it down a little, and the keyword system can really magnify the travelling back and forth when it's so easy to miss out on a keyword or get completely lost in this world. Final Fantasy 3 next month, really looking forward to returning to the job system and going back to the Crystal Tower.